Far away on a quiet world circling a dim sun, there lived a people who had once thrived in peace. Their cities were built from shining stone. Their fields once grew enough to feed every mouth, and their songs carried across valleys with joy. But over the years, disaster after disaster had struck them. Strange diseases spread through their villages, taking away the young and the old. The rains failed and crops withered. Hunger became a daily shadow. Families searched for food where none could be found, and even the strongest leaders began to lose hope. In their desperation, the alien civilization gathered what little strength they had left to send a message into the stars. They poured all their energy into building a signal that would carry across light years, searching for anyone at all, who could hear them. It was not a message of war nor a demand for riches. It was a simple cry, "Help us." They asked for medicine to cure the sick. They asked for food to fill the empty stomachs of their children. They asked for doctors, for healers, for people who could bring comfort where their own knowledge had failed. They did not send the message lightly. Among their elders, there were long debates. Some feared that calling out into the unknown might invite danger instead of aid. But hunger has a way of silencing fear. When parents watched their children starve, when brothers buried their sisters, when the night was filled with coughing instead of laughter, the choice became clear. It was better to risk the unknown than to die in silence. As the signal left their world and traveled across the endless dark, the aliens held on to a fragile hope. They had heard whispers in the galaxy about a new race rising in power, the humans. Stories carried by traders and wanderers told of Earth, a world of survivors where people had endured wars, disasters, and hardships, yet always found a way forward. Humans were said to be clever, able to build machines that could cross the void and create medicines to heal even the gravest wounds. More importantly, the stories described them as resilient and generous, a people who valued life and had hearts ready to help others in need. For the starving aliens, these stories were like a light in the darkness. If humanity heard their call, surely they would come not with weapons but with kindness. They imagined ships full of food, stacked high with golden grain and clean water. They imagined doctors with gentle hands stepping down from shining vessels, ready to tend to the sick. They dreamed of machines that could purify their poisoned rivers and seeds that could grow strong even in dry soil. To them, humanity was not just another species among the stars. It was a symbol of hope, a possible savior. Every night, families gathered around their dim fires and whispered about what help might look like. Children, their faces thin from hunger, asked their parents, "When will the humans arrive? Will they bring bread? Will they make us well again?" And though the parents did not know if the signal had even been heard, they smiled and told stories of the visitors they longed for. They described healers who would walk through their villages, curing the weak with glowing medicines. They told tales of great ships arriving like angels, their lights shining like second suns. For many, the thought of humanity became more than hope. It became a kind of faith. They pictured humans as saviors who would not only heal their bodies but also teach them new ways to live. Their old ways had failed. Their knowledge was not enough. But perhaps, they thought, these beings from Earth would bring new ideas, new tools, and new wisdom to guide them into a better future. The leaders of the alien people prepared for the day help might arrive. They organized welcoming councils, ready to guide the visitors across their lands. They planned where the aid stations could be built, which families would be fed first, and how to share whatever came so that no one would be left behind. Even though they were weak, they wanted to show their gratitude properly. They imagined greeting the humans with songs, dances, and gifts of their own art, to show that they were not beggars but partners who wished to survive with dignity. As the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, they waited. The sick still coughed. The hungry still searched the dry fields, yet the hope never completely left them. Each night they looked up at the stars, scanning the sky for a glimmer of movement, for a light that might mean their call had been answered. Mothers told their children to be patient, that good things took time, that the humans would come. And in their hearts they truly believed it. What they did not know was how their signal had been received. On Earth, when the message reached human ears, it stirred memories of their own struggles. Humanity knew famine. Humanity knew disease. And humanity also knew how dangerous the galaxy could be. The leaders on Earth read the alien plea not only as a call for medicine and food, but as a warning of vulnerability. Where there was weakness, there were predators. Where there was suffering, there were always those ready to exploit it. And so when humanity decided to answer, they did so in their own way. But on that distant world, still waiting, still suffering, they did not know what was coming. In their hearts, they believed the humans would arrive as healers, as doctors, as saviors. They imagined relief, kindness, and gentle hands. They expected nothing more and nothing less than the gift of survival. To them, humanity was the rising sun after a long night of hunger and pain. They could not imagine anything else. The day finally came when the people of the alien world looked up at their skies and saw movement. At first it was only a shimmer, like distant stars shifting. Then the shadows grew larger, blotting out the sun. One by one, enormous shapes descended from the void, their hulls made of dark metal that gleamed like knives against the light. The aliens gathered in their streets and fields, pointing, whispering, clutching one another with wide eyes. They had been waiting for ships, but not these ships. They had imagined vessels with white sails of light, bringing doctors and crates of food. They had dreamed of graceful ships filled with healing hands. But what now covered their skies were massive warships, humanity's greatest weapons. The air trembled with their engines, and the ground shook as smaller ships broke away, diving lower into the atmosphere. The thunder of their arrival drowned out the songs of birds and the whispers of wind. Hope, which had been their companion through long months of waiting, seemed to falter under the roar. Fear spread like fire through the crowd. Parents pulled their children close, elders hid behind the younger, and voices rose in frantic questions. Were these the humans they had called for? Had the message been misunderstood? Instead of kindness, had they summoned conquerors? The ships hung above them like giants, their shadows stretching across fields and cities, covering the land in darkness. To many, it felt as though the sun itself had been stolen away. When the first human soldiers disembarked, the aliens watched in silence. The humans stepped down in heavy armor, their movements precise, their faces hidden behind helmets. Weapons gleamed at their sides, and their boots struck the ground with the rhythm of discipline. There were no doctors carrying medicine, no healers with warm smiles. Instead, there were soldiers, rows and rows of them, moving with perfect order, their presence commanding respect and fear alike. Some of the aliens wanted to believe still. Perhaps the doctors are inside, they whispered. Perhaps the food is stored in the ships and these are only guards. They searched for a sign of gentleness, a smile, a gesture of peace. But all they saw were patrols forming, armored vehicles rolling down the streets and warships spreading out across the skies. The humans were not careless in their movements. They watched every corner, secured every open space, and set up defenses as if preparing for battle. Confusion grew heavier with each passing hour. The leaders of the alien world tried to greet the humans, approaching with offerings and hopeful words. But the soldiers did not sing or embrace them. They stood tall, silent, and only responded with firm orders and gestures that the aliens barely understood. Food did not pour out of the ships, nor did doctors rush to the sick. Instead, cannons turned outward, scanning the horizon for threats, and engines roared as fleets circled overhead. In the villages, fear turned into whispers of betrayal. "We asked for aid," they murmured, and they sent soldiers. Some cried openly, hearts broken by the sight of armored machines instead of healing hands. Others, more cautious, argued that perhaps this was protection, that maybe the humans believed danger was near, and so they came ready to fight. But even those voices trembled, because the image before them looked far more like conquest than compassion. The sound of engines filled every waking moment. Where once the nights had been quiet, now they echoed with the hum of ships above. Children who had once looked up at the stars with hope now pressed their faces into their parents' shoulders, frightened of the great machines that loomed overhead. Farmers who had dreamed of new seeds and tools now stood in their dry fields, staring at soldiers marching past. The gentle picture they had painted of humanity shattered under the weight of steel and fire. Rumors began to spread like a plague. Did the humans misunderstand our message? Some asked. Did they think we wanted protection, not medicine? Others whispered darker fears. Perhaps they never wanted to help at all. Perhaps they see us as weak and ripe for control. These questions grew louder in the marketplaces, in the gathering halls, in the places where families huddled together. No one knew the answer, and the humans gave no explanation. The alien people had always been proud, even in their weakness. Now, standing under the shadow of human warships, they felt small, fragile, and powerless. The very sight of the fleet made them question everything. What if this was not salvation, but the end of their freedom? What if, by crying out for help, they had invited chains instead of healing, and yet some still clung to hope? They pointed out that no harm had yet been done, that no weapons had been turned against them. The soldiers marched, yes, but they also gave order where chaos had threatened. The fleets patrolled, yes, but perhaps they were protecting rather than preparing to attack. These hopeful ones begged the others to be patient, to wait and see what the humans would truly do. But patience was hard to keep when every day felt colder beneath the looming warships. The thunder of engines pressed against their ears, a constant reminder that their skies no longer belonged to them. Their hearts battled between awe and terror, wonder and despair. They had called for help and humanity had answered, but the answer was not what they had dreamed. To the aliens, it was as if the universe itself had played a cruel trick. They had asked for hands to heal their wounds, but instead they were given hands that carried weapons. They had asked for ships to carry food, but instead they received ships heavy with cannons. They had expected the gentle hum of healing machines, but their world now shook with the growl of engines built for war. No one could say for certain whether the humans had misunderstood their plea, or whether the message had been ignored. All the aliens knew was this: their skies, once a canvas of stars and hope, were now filled with warships. And beneath that iron ceiling, their hearts could no longer tell if they were saved or conquered. The days after the humans arrived were filled with unease. The alien people, weak from hunger and illness, went to the humans with outstretched hands. They begged for food to feed their starving children, for medicine to cure the fevers that swept through their villages, for water that would not poison their bodies. And in truth, the humans did bring these things. Crates of supplies were unloaded from the ships. Vaccines were prepared. Clean water was filtered and given out. And shelters were built where the sick could rest. But none of it came freely. None of it came gently. Every gift was surrounded by the cold presence of armed soldiers, tanks, and war machines that watched every move. When the aliens stood in line for food, they did so under the gaze of armored men holding weapons. When they carried medicine back to their homes, ships circled above them like hawks. Even when water was poured into their empty vessels, the rumble of engines and the heavy boots of soldiers filled the air. The people received the aid, yes, but it was wrapped in fear, as though kindness had been chained to cannons. At first, many tried to be grateful. Food filled empty bellies and medicine saved lives. Children who had once coughed all night began to breathe easier. The old, who had thought they would not see another season, found strength again. For these families, gratitude was stronger than fear. They whispered, "Perhaps this is simply the human way. Perhaps they cannot separate their kindness from their strength." To them, it did not matter that tanks stood beside clinics or that soldiers guarded bags of grain. What mattered was that their children lived another day. But others could not ignore the shadow that hung over every act of help. They looked at the soldiers' weapons and wondered why they were needed. If humanity had truly come to help, why were they treated like prisoners in their own towns? Why? Did every sip of water feel like it had been earned under the barrel of a gun? These people began to mutter in secret corners that the humans were not saviors, but rulers, slowly wrapping the world in their control. Tension grew between the two sides of thought. Villagers argued in marketplaces. Some said, "We are alive only because of them. Would you rather starve than accept their help?" Others replied bitterly, "Help should not feel like chains. They did not come to heal us, they came to own us." The argument spread, and soon whole families were divided, some loyal to the humans, others suspicious of every action they took. The human commanders, too, felt the strain. They had been ordered to keep control, to protect their supplies and to prevent chaos. They had seen worlds before where desperation turned to riots, where starving people fought each other for scraps. To them, strict order was necessary. They told themselves that the weapons, the patrols, the cannons in the sky were not threats, but protection. Without them, aid could not be delivered. Without them, everything could fall into chaos. And yet, they could see the fear in the eyes of the aliens when a soldier passed too close. They could hear the silence that fell whenever engines roared overhead. They knew their presence was not seen as gentle. Stories began to spread like wildfire among the aliens. In one village, it was said a man was struck by a soldier when he tried to take food before his turn. In another, people whispered that humans had taken land to build their camps and would never give it back. Some claimed that the water they gave was poisoned, meant to weaken the survivors so that humanity could rule them easily. None of these stories could be proven, yet the whispers grew louder than the truth. Fear does not wait for evidence. It feeds on shadows. And still, there were moments of real kindness. A soldier giving his own ration to a hungry child. A medic staying awake through the night to save a dying elder. A group of engineers repairing broken wells so that villages could drink again. These small acts shone like lights in the darkness, and those who saw them carried hope in their hearts. They told others, "See, the humans care. They are not here to destroy us. They are here to protect us." But every light was quickly swallowed by the sight of orbiting warships that never left the sky. For every smile a human gave, there was the unblinking eye of a cannon above it. For every loaf of bread there was the stomp of armored boots. Even kindness became a question. Were they saving the aliens because they cared? Or were they saving them because a living people would serve humanity's interests better than a dead one? In time, the aliens began to live two lives. Outwardly, they took the aid, drank the water, and accepted the medicine. They lined up at the checkpoints and did as they were told. But in whispers, in the privacy of their homes, they questioned everything. Some dreamed of rebellion, though they had neither the strength nor the weapons to fight. Others prayed that the humans would reveal a softer side, that one day the cannons would turn away, and the soldiers would remove their helmets and show gentle faces. The tension was thick, like a storm waiting to break. The aliens were desperate, the humans cautious, and between them lay a gulf of mistrust. Each side believed it was doing what was necessary. The humans believed they were protecting order. The aliens believed they had traded one disaster for another. And so, every day was filled with uneasy silence. Every gift carried the taste of fear, and every glance between the two peoples asked the same question. Were the humans truly here to help? Or had the aliens invited their own conquerors into their homes? The days of doubt and fear had stretched long, and the alien people had grown used to living under the shadow of human warships. Some accepted the aid with gratitude, while others whispered that the humans were simply waiting for the right moment to take everything. Suspicion had become as common as hunger once was. But everything changed the day the raiders came. The attack began without warning. One morning the skies darkened, not with the familiar outlines of human ships, but with sharp, jagged vessels belonging to a hostile empire. These raiders had been watching from the edge of the stars, waiting for the perfect chance to strike. They saw the alien world as weak, its people starving, its defenses broken. To them it was not a place to save, but a prize to seize. They wanted slaves, resources, and territory, and so they came like vultures, ready to pick apart what little life remained. Panic spread quickly through the alien cities. People screamed as the raiders' weapons lit up the sky. Homes shook under the first bombardments, and families rushed to hide wherever they could. Old fears returned in full force. Had their call for help not only brought humans but also drawn other predators to their world? Mothers clutched their children, praying for mercy, while fathers stood powerless as fire rained down from the heavens. The aliens expected the humans to stand aside, or perhaps even join in. After all, had the humans not arrived with cannons and soldiers instead of food and healers? Had they not controlled every gift with an iron hand? For many it seemed obvious that humanity would show its true face now when the world was weakest. Some whispered, "This is the end. We asked for doctors and brought doom upon ourselves." But then something unexpected happened. The human warships, which had circled above for so long in silence, came alive with a thunder greater than anything the aliens had ever heard. Engines roared, fleets moved into formation, and weapons turned, not toward the starving civilians below, but toward the jagged raider ships above. The sky became a battlefield of fire and metal. Human cannons blazed, missiles streaked across the darkness, and great warships surged forward like predators defending their young. The raiders, who had expected an easy victory, were met instead with fury. Within minutes, explosions filled the heavens, painting the world with bursts of light so bright they were visible even in daylight. The aliens watched in shock as the invaders, once so terrifying, were ripped apart one by one. On the ground, alien families stood frozen, staring upward with wide eyes. Children pointed at the sky, no longer with fear but with wonder. For the first time, The thunder of engines did not sound like oppression. It sounded like protection. The same warships that had cast shadows of dread now cast shields of safety. The battle raged for hours, though to the terrified civilians it felt like days. Every explosion shook the ground. Every burst of fire lit up the night, and every scream of the raider ships as they burned filled the air. The humans fought with precision, with power, and with a determination that seemed unbreakable. The aliens, who had once seen the soldiers as conquerors, began to see something else in them, guardians who stood between them and destruction. When the last raider ship exploded in flames, silence followed. Slowly the skies cleared, and the humans emerged victorious. Not a single raider vessel remained. Their empire had been crushed in a matter of hours by the sheer might of the human fleet. The aliens could hardly believe what they had witnessed. The humans had not come to enslave them. They had not turned their weapons on the weak or taken advantage of their suffering. Instead, they had defended them with a strength greater than anything they could have imagined. In the villages and cities, people began to cry, not in fear, but in relief. Families embraced one another, whispering words of thanks into the night air. Leaders who had once doubted humanity now bowed their heads in respect. Children cheered at the sight of human soldiers standing guard, no longer afraid of their armor or their weapons. For the first time, the aliens felt safe. The whispers that had once spoken of betrayal began to change. Now people told different stories. "Did you see how the humans fought for us?" they said. "Did you see how they stood between us and death?" In place of suspicion grew admiration, and in place of fear grew trust. The image of humanity as conquerors faded, replaced by the image of protectors who had come armed not to destroy but to defend. Even the smallest gestures began to shine brighter after the battle. A soldier handing bread to a hungry child now seemed like the hand of a guardian, not an occupier. The sight of tanks at the edge of villages no longer felt like chains, but like shields against another attack. The cannons in the sky once hated were now welcomed, because the aliens knew those weapons had saved them from extinction. That night, as the fires of the raider ships still glowed faintly in the distance, the alien people looked up at the stars and saw them differently. Where once the stars had been cold and silent, they now felt alive with hope. The humans had answered their call in a way no one expected. They had come not with gentle hands, but with iron fists ready to strike down any who threatened. And though it was not the kind of aid the aliens had imagined, it was the aid they truly needed. The memory of that day would never leave them. They would remember the fear of the raider attack, the thunder of the human fleet, and the way the sky lit up with fire as humanity fought for their survival. And most of all, they would remember the moment when they looked at the humans and saw not conquerors, but guardians, beings who carried both kindness and power, beings who brought not only aid but also protection. In their hearts, the aliens finally understood why humanity had come with warships instead of hospital vessels. The galaxy was cruel and danger lurked in every shadow. What good would doctors be if the people were slaughtered by raiders? What use was food if another empire claimed their lands? Humanity had brought strength first, because only through strength could kindness survive. For the first time since their suffering began, the aliens no longer felt alone. They knew they had protectors in the skies, protectors who had shown their true intentions in fire and steel. And from that day forward, whenever the thunder of human engines echoed above, it no longer carried fear. It carried the sound of safety. When the humans finally prepared to leave, the alien world was no longer the same. The land bore scars of the struggle they had endured. Cities still carried the marks of famine and disease, and the countryside showed the ruins of battles fought above their skies. The fields were burned in places, rivers still choked with ash, and families continued to grieve the ones they had lost before help arrived. But there was also life again. Children laughed faintly in the streets where silence had once ruled. Villages had water that was clean enough to drink, and families could sit together without the sharp edge of hunger gnawing at their stomachs. The humans did not leave empty-handed nor without leaving something behind. They left the alien people with medicine, food, and tools. They built shelters that could withstand storms, wells that would not dry, and clinics where local healers could learn new ways to fight sickness. What once had been a hopeless plea into the stars was now answered with survival, even if survival had come wrapped in steel and fire. The aliens had what they had asked for, but they had also received something they never expected: the memory of an armada filling their skies. When the last human warship rose from the ground and joined the fleet, its engines glowing against the horizon, the aliens gathered to watch. Some waved in gratitude, shouting blessings into the sky. Others stood in silence, unsure if they should feel relief that the humans were leaving or fear that they might one day return. The sound of the fleet departing echoed for miles, a deep roar fading into the distance until only quiet remained. The world was alive again, but it carried the weight of what had happened. Stories of the event spread quickly, carried by traders, travelers, and those who had witnessed it with their own eyes. In every port across the galaxy, people whispered the same line. They asked for aid. Humanity sent an armada. It became more than just a story. It became a warning, a tale of both hope and fear. To some, it was proof of humanity's power and its strange way of helping others. To others, it was a sign that humans were not to be trusted, that they answered cries for help with warships instead of open hands. For those who believed in the goodness of humanity, the story was inspiring. They said, "Look, the humans brought salvation. They destroyed the raiders and protected the weak. They may be fierce, but they are protectors at heart." These people saw Earth as a new kind of guardian in the galaxy, one that acted quickly and decisively, one that would never abandon those who called for help. To them, humanity was not cruel but practical, showing that compassion sometimes needed to be carried on the back of power. But others told the story differently. They said, "Beware the humans. They do not come gently. Their kindness is edged with steel. Their food and medicine come only with the shadow of guns." To these voices, humanity was dangerous, a double-edged sword that could save or destroy depending on its mood. They feared that one day, a plea for help might invite not protection, but domination. They looked at the Armada not as saviors, but as conquerors who simply chose mercy this time. On the alien world itself, the feelings remained mixed. The people could not forget the fear they felt when the warships first darkened their skies. They could not erase the memory of soldiers watching over every loaf of bread, every drop of medicine, every act of help. Even after the battle that saved them, even after humanity proved their weapons were for protection, the memory lingered. Aid had come, yes, but never softly. Their children would grow up hearing both sides of the story, that the humans saved them and that the humans scared them. Generations later, monuments were built in their cities. Some showed the warships, rising into the heavens carved as symbols of protection and strength. Others showed figures of soldiers standing with both weapons and food in hand, a reminder that help had not come without power. At schools, teachers told the story in careful words, making sure the young understood both gratitude and caution. The phrase, "They asked for aid, humanity sent an armada," was repeated often, sometimes with pride, sometimes with a shiver of fear. Across the galaxy, the phrase became part of history. Civilizations that heard it wondered what they should do if they ever faced disaster. Should they send their own call for help to humanity, knowing that help would come armed? Or should they remain silent, fearing the price of such aid? The story traveled further than the fleet itself, shaping how countless worlds saw the humans. It was not just about one planet's survival, it was about Earth's new place in the stars. And for humanity, the event left its mark as well. The commanders knew their choice had changed the way others would see them. They had answered with power, not gentleness, and though they had saved lives, they had also planted seeds of both respect and fear. Some on Earth called it proof of humanity's destiny, that they were meant to protect weaker civilizations no matter the cost. Others worried that the galaxy would one day turn against them, frightened of their strength. But the decision had been made, and the memory could not be undone. On the alien world, life slowly began again. Fields were planted with new seeds, families rebuilt their homes, and laughter returned to streets that had once been silent with sorrow. But even as they lived on, the people never forgot the sight of the sky filled with human warships, weapons glinting, engines roaring. It became part of their songs, their prayers, and their warnings to one another. And so, the story of that day lived on. It lived in the voices of survivors, in the whispers of traders, in the debates of leaders, and in the fears of strangers who had never even seen a human face. Some called humanity heroes, others called them conquerors, but all agreed on one thing. The galaxy would never forget the day a desperate cry for help was answered not by healers and supplies alone, but by the thunder of an armada. That memory became eternal, carved not only into the history of one world but into the consciousness of many. Whether seen as dangerous saviors or iron-handed guardians, humanity had shown itself in a way that could not be ignored. Their compassion had come like a sword, sharp, heavy, and decisive. And while the wounds of the alien world healed slowly, the echo of the fleet's engines remained, a reminder to all that Earth's way of helping was unlike any other. From that day forward, whenever a world faced despair and thought of calling out into the void, one question lingered in every mind. If the humans answer, will they bring peace, or will they bring war wrapped in the promise of salvation? Whatever the answer, the galaxy knew this truth. Once the humans arrive, nothing will ever be the same again.